Good morning from California. Thank you everyone for joining me. My name is Nancy Chu, your friendly PM leadership coach, and I would like to welcome my guest today, Leanne Stewart, to the High Vibe live stream with the purpose to uplift product thinkers and product builders out there. And I'm so excited for this talk today on compelling storytelling techniques, which is a topic that I am very passionate about. And today, Leanne is the expert on storytelling. Let me tell you a little bit about who Leanne is. She is the owner of her own company, B2B Marketing Storyteller. She's also ex Meta Executive Communications Manager, where she created Meta's first thought leadership organization. And she also elevated the professional profiles for Meta VPs across industry channels through very powerful ghostwriting and storytelling steeped in thought leading and market first insights. Leanne, welcome.
Great.
Tell us about how you got started in storytelling, why you created Meta's first thought leadership organization.
For sure. So it's great to be here. Welcome, everybody. I have been creating content professionally for a few decades now. And when I was at what was then Facebook, the reason why I created the Thought Leadership Organization was because there was this opportunity where there was a very large group of very smart people who weren't telling their story strongly enough. They weren't invoking the types of emotion or feelings that they could project when they were talking about their product or their ideas. And so it really started with just helping a few people with better storytelling. If they were talking on an industry stage or if they were going to be have a byline in an industry magazine, I would come in and ghostwrite for them or work with their voice to make it stronger on stage.
And what do you mean by good story versus an average story?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a good story is, well, maybe we'll start with the average story.
Okay,
Um,
good.
so an average story is basically somebody talking about how, something goes from A to B, just basic, like, this is what I'm thinking and here's why it's good. But there's no emotion to it. It's just an explanation of features. There's no benefit to the person who's listening to it.
Mm,
Average story really focuses on the person telling the story, whereas a good story or a great story makes sure that the focus of the story is the person who's listening to the story and it's beneficial to them. You're helping guide that person from what they used to believe into what you want them to believe through
mhm,
the power of storytelling. Um, so a great way to think through that is to start with a question like, what do they think now? What belief do they have now? And what do I want them to believe after that? And
mm,
then listing the types of benefits that that person who's listening to the story may glom onto to help them get to that state. So you're basically changing hearts and minds
mhm,
with words. Um, Another way to think of it is a good story or average story, it just basically tells you what's going on or they sell you. So if you think about when you're at a party, for example, and somebody comes up to you, you don't know who they are, and they're immediately like telling you all the reasons why you should be friends with them, and then they're pushing their cell phone on you, just like, come on, call me. You're like, wait, you don't know anything about me, right? So it's the idea of like show, don't tell. So a good or great story makes sure that you are showing the person why they should be friends with you.
mhm.
You, as the person who's on the receiving end, is seeing this person come to life in ways that you may want to, yes, hang out with them a bit more. So in
You
some instances,
mentioned
it's called
no, go
show
ahead.
don't tell, and in some instances, it's called show don't sell.
Mm. How does that relate to thought leadership?
So thought leadership is tying in your great thoughts and helping people believe, come to the decision with you. You're bringing somebody along the journey with you. So again, an average thought leadership story is just somebody telling you what they believe
Mm.
And it is a powerful message. But if it doesn't resonate with the person who's listening to the story, if they can't envision themselves along that journey with you, they're not
Mhm.
the buy-in, and you're not going to be seen as a thought leader in that space. So by
Interesting.
infusing some areas of like activating the benefit, making sure that the audience is part of the story as you're speaking to them, you're relaying their problems and showing the solutions that you can provide with your thought leadership or with your grand idea. You're really taking these people along. So it's not just you as the thought leader, but you're creating a community of thought leaders based on your idea.
Do you have an example that you could walk us through to demonstrate what an average story that what an average story might sound like so that we could get a better feel about what you're guiding us on, which is average story is what I might believe in and not necessarily what I want them to believe.
Yeah. So I think similar to the story I had before about being at a party and somebody just listing the benefit, like the features of them as a good person and why they should be your friend. An average story is just somebody going, I have this idea. This idea is a great idea, and I came up with it just a few weeks ago. And here's my explanation of why this idea is so good. And A, B, and C. And that therefore this is a great story that you can now use for yourselves. It's an okay story because you've
Mm,
listed the three benefits, you've listed the three things that can help people understand. But if we want to position it into more of a great story, it's really positioning it into how the audience is going to buy into it. So it starts off with identifying what the problem is, what the problem you're solving with your thought leadership is. And you can enrapture that in an anecdote that the audience will understand. And
mm,
that's why it's so important to understand the nuances of the people who you're speaking with. So if
got
there's
it.
somebody who, if you say have an idea with somebody who, and it's a one-on-one conversation, and you want to infuse some storytelling tactics within this, if you know that this person is really into sports, you can kind of create an anecdote about sports that allude to your thought leadership idea. So, like, hey, let's say your thought leadership idea is about having motivation to do a sport, not just sit back and watch it, or to do something rather than just sit back and watch something happen. So, your thought leadership is motivation. You can tell this person who's really into sports, like, hey, all those years that you've been watching and sitting back watching football, you can transition that now into something that is a bit more like getting involved in the sport. How can you actually become less leaning back and leaning into the sport? Well, here are some ideas that I have, and come along with me on this journey. You don't have to say that part, but you're
Mm.
going to take them along the journey in order to help them understand. And a
I
good
just had
tactic.
a
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just had a thought in
Mhm.
this party scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very similar to an interview situation almost. And there's a
Yes.
lot of PMs in the market right now
Mhm.
preparing for their next interview. How might they be able to utilize storytelling in an interview setting without making the response to be long?
Yeah. Well, focus on the story first, because even if your answer is long
Mm.
and they're still engaged in the story, it's fine.
Mm.
It's
Then it
less about
doesn't feel
like
long.
yeah, it's less about like always think about quality, not quantity, first of
Mhm.
all, when you're talking about a story. So don't worry about it being too long, because the more you practice this, the
Yeah.
better you'll get at self-editing based on how people are responding. So when it comes to, say, an interview question, a lot of times when people are sitting down speaking to a job posting, they're talking about how they can, you know, their resume, the things that they are good at will benefit the company, but they don't speak about how about the company in and of itself. They don't speak mainly about how they can naturally fit within the company, and that's really about understanding more deep insights about the companies and their challenges,
Mhm.
understanding spaces where you might be able to fit in to help solve the problems that they're not loudly talking about at this point.
Right.
A lot of that has to do with just deep research, and I do this in any situation where I have an audience that I need to speak with. I'm researching who these
Mhm.
people are, what their
Mm.
problems are. A lot of times when I'd have a brief, for example, that I'd ask the marketing team to put together, I'd say,
Mhm.
"What watch-outs do we have about these people? Like, do they
Mm.
like us? Do they not like us? Like,
Mm.
should I say something that, recognizes the elephant in the room that they don't like us?" If we pivot that to an interview setting, it's doing
Mm.
that deep research, going to the places we're all going in now, like Glassdoor, etc.
Right.
But just seeing how people are speaking about the company and how you can envision that company from like hiring you as this person, but they're going to
Mm.
get this much more benefit because you're speaking to them in that way where you are naturally infusing yourself in that space where they can envision you in that role
Right.
already. You're not just listing your features, you're providing the benefit.
I love that. I love that you called out the deep research and that can apply in a interview situation and it could also apply in a work presentation type of situation, which leads me to my next question. You mentioned that better stories build better business results. Why do you
Yes.
say that?
That's actually the tagline for my company, B2B
Mhm.
Marketing Storyteller. Humans are naturally wired to engage, remember, and trust stories versus just a bunch of numbers and data and features that I was talking about earlier. So
Mm.
we all are naturally interested in hearing a story. It's why we watch, YouTube and why we're watching streaming shows all the time. So when you think about an engagement, it's like it's a story of any kind can spark curiosity and makes the information more memorable. So when we're watching, say, a show on Netflix, we can relay what that story was about to other people and it
Mhm.
evolves into its own life. And you can do that also in a boardroom if you're doing a small presentation. The ability to create an engaging story helps people then relay that story more,
Mhm.
building that better business result because you're kind of creating that strong connection to the
Mhm.
story in and of itself and what your idea is. And then again, that deals with the remembering as well. So, narrative stories make it easier to remember information. So, when I mentioned earlier, putting something within an anecdote is a good way to help people remember what
Yeah.
you're speaking about because it's something that they can relate to.
What's an
Um,
example of an anecdote?
It's usually just something about people's everyday lives. So
Mm.
if you think through a very basic story, like you think about typical salesperson, and they're like, "Hey, are you feeling the pain and frustration of this? Try that."
Mhm.
This is the anecdote. This is the story that everyone can relate
Mm.
to. Um, it's you have to really personalize the story based on what you're speaking to. I
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend just picking a generic anecdote and trying to
Mm.
squeeze it in. It's really about who that audience is. And
How
that
do
kind of
you
builds trust. Sorry, I'm just gonna do so we have the engaging, the
Mhm.
remembering, and the trust. And the trust brings out the human side to the story, and it drives that deeper connection to the business information. So, if you can explain a benefit and have people be like nodding their heads and being like, "I understand that because I
Yeah.
connect with it on a deeper level," then they trust it. And then they're more likely able to put themselves into that story as well.
How could we apply this understanding to a internal leadership review, for example, a product review or product roadmap or product strategy? It means that we are presenting to a room of leaders, and these leaders it will be a mixture of leaders from the product team, from engineering team, from marketing, from data science, etc.
Yeah. Really, it's something I alluded to before, and it's bringing the people from having them understand the state of the situation before and how you brought them into the state of the situation where you wanted them to be.
Mm.
And that's a great way to kind of infuse an anecdote in there as well. So the idea is kind of a chart is like you want people in the room to have them understand this, and you're going to get there by explaining what it was like before. And you're going to really tell that story. I wouldn't overemphasize the drama. I wouldn't make it as, this horrible thing that happened before and you solved the world.
Mm.
But you're telling a story about how life was before And that
Mm,
life is something that they all lived in. So they will understand that and they will build that trust.
mm.
And then you're
Can you
transitioning it. Sorry, go ahead.
transition to
Transitioning it into the steps that you took in order to get them to where we wanted them to be. And
mm,
even if you're telling a product story where it wasn't as successful, like you were hoping that you would get from A to B, but maybe you
mm,
got like halfway through and something jammed up, that
mm,
creates a wonderful tension point in the story, which sounds strange, but all stories require tension because
mm.
it's up to the storyteller to relieve that tension. So you can do that whether the product was not successful or even if it was successful.
That is
Always be
super
sure to
interesting.
put that bridge.
Um, I was just thinking, as product managers, oftentimes we present a roadmap or we present um, amazing progress that the team has worked
Mhm,
on.
mhm.
When we're presenting something like a roadmap, what would an example of tension be?
Where something fell apart, where there was a surprising
Mm,
moment where everyone's heart stopped because something went not the way that you expected it to go. A lot of times people cover that under moss because they're like, no, we're great. We figured it all out. We're perfect. But they don't explain how they figured it out because they don't go into telling the problem,
mm,
telling the challenge. And I think telling stories of failure and then how you overcame those failures are absolutely a wonderful way to tell a story because then people really, everyone's failed. Everyone's had those moments, but being
mhm.
able to clearly identify the steps that you took in order to overcome that failure and bringing along the audience along the journey is a wonderful way to kind of get into that roadmap. And it's a great way to trigger that memory. Like, look how problem solving they are, for example.
We have a question from the audience, so let me just bring that up. This is a question from Kay. Will a recording be available afterwards? Yes, absolutely. You'll be able to watch the replay here on LinkedIn or on YouTube afterwards, so don't worry about that. And thank you so much, Kay, for tuning in. So, coming back to um, using better stories to drive better business results, I feel like as product managers, we're so wired to tell success stories all the time.
Mhm.
And what you mentioned just now is kind of like a reframe almost.
Yeah.
That you gotta introduce some kind of tension. And I never really thought of it that way because we just wanna show the executives that we're doing really good work. Look at all the engagement metrics that increase. Look at all the sessions that we drove, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes if you only hear good news,
Mhm.
it starts to just become a shade. Like you don't
Mm,
actually become engaged into the actual story. So I
yeah.
know we were going to talk about like engaging the audience in a bit, and one of the ways to do that, and one of the ways you can think through this, is a typical storytelling trope. So I'm going to like talk to the audience for a
Yeah,
second
yeah.
and be like, okay, and you can put a comment in if this is tell me what movie you think I'm talking about. Okay. So this you have a person, they've always lived in this village all of their lives and they're happy, but they've always known that they have a bigger calling in life. So they turn to go to that bigger calling in life, but they're frightened and they're scared. Luckily, they find a mentor who takes them through this new area where they encounter all of these challenges and dangers. And they always think, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail. But they manage to persevere each and every time until the very end when they manage this huge challenge in life. And they think that they're going to die and it looks like they're not going to live. But then they find it within their own strength to come through in the end. And then they return to their home village stronger and more powerful than ever, having accomplished that mission. So, what movie do you think that might be from? What do you think, Nancy?
I don't know, I just keep on thinking Shrek.
That's right. It could be Shrek, actually. It could be Star Wars. It could be
Star Wars,
Moana.
yeah.
It can be Lord of the Rings, and
Mhm.
it's a trope. It's something that a lot of screenwriters use as part of their storytelling journey. It's called the hero's journey.
Yeah.
So be sure to look up the hero's journey in Google because you will see that it is a circular motion where the hero starts and then they encounter challenges along the way. And those are the tension points.
Mhm.
And tension points are absolutely imperative for a story to thrive and get people leaned in and interested because those tension points usually relate to experiences we have ourselves. So
Right.
if you follow through that hero's journey in a way, in a business way, making sure that the audience is the hero of the story, not the product that you're selling, not
Oh,
you.
I have to
That's
put this up on the screen because this whole time I was thinking, is the who's the I thought the product was the hero.
And that's a challenge that happens all the time, especially in business communication. They always think that the product is the hero. I'm going to tell the story of this product as hero going through all these challenges. But instead, pivot it into your experience or the team's experience or the audience's experience, because this is the result that they're going to get from that journey.
I just put it up here because I had to summarize it because this is a reframe.
Mhm.
Hero's journey. The product is not the hero. And this is where product managers come in and we need to reframe our thinking. We're so conditioned to think that our hero, our product will solve all the problems. But the
And
audience is the
it
hero.
is solving the problems, but think of your product as more as the mentor that's
Right.
guiding the hero along the journey. The hero is your audience, and being able to tell how your product solved your audience's problems, your customers'
Mm,
problems, or even the people in the room's problems will
yes.
help pivot it into something that makes sense for them.
Let me put that down here. Product is not the hero, the audience is. Product is the mentor. Oh my God, I'm having a mind blow moment right now. Product is the mentor. Product helps the hero
Mhm.
achieve their goals, and the audience is the hero.
Yes.
And the hero in this case is not necessarily the users of the product.
It can be, and depending on what type of story you're telling,
Right.
but it can also be the people who you're speaking to in the boardroom, understanding what their challenges were in perhaps approving this product or their
Mhm.
excitement about this product. They may have visions about this product, and as you were working on it, it may have pivoted into something completely different that's better,
Mhm.
and you have to sell that. You have
Mm.
to, again, bring them along that journey, but you have to help them be like, okay, you had this vision for this product. You're the hero. I'm going to guide you as to why our vision is a bit better. And yes, you're going to ask these hard questions along the way. Those are
Right.
the challenges. We will address those because the product
Mm.
will help answer those challenges.
What if it's a approval seeking type of executive meeting where we are asking for their approval? Does the
I think,
same framing still work?
yeah, it's
Mm,
the more that you personalize your
yeah,
story and make it less about a product or an inanimate object, the more likely you are tapping into that engagement and that trust building that comes through storytelling. So
right,
always try to infuse a personal or people mindset
right,
into your stories. And again, help take that. If you're doing an approval, you want to get them
mhm,
from not approving to approving.
right,
So that's the steps that you need to think through as far as creating that story. What do they need to hear in order for them to get to that approval state?
yeah,
And yes, you can infuse the various tactical things about the product, but if you wrap those into stories and benefits to them, to the
yeah.
company, to the audience, to the customer, that's more likely to pivot into an approval.
I love that. And we have a comment from the audience. Can you speak to how to prepare for an audience where you don't know that much about the people you're presenting to? For instance, if you're new to a company or you don't have a lot of context yet.
That's a great question. Thanks, Kelly. It's a challenge that I often face because I often would write speeches for executives who would be presenting at industry conferences, and we would not know who was going to be in the audience. And so quite often we would have to kind of guess. So one of the ways to do that is to first try to do as much research as you can about the company. So even if you are new, there are areas that you can look at how people are speaking about the company, be that Glassdoor, maybe Blind, maybe not, but those types of places where people are speaking truthfully about the company. And also just you have an understanding of the company yourself, your perspective. And this might be an indication of helping you get from a state where you understand an area and you're relying on them to provide you with the information to get you into a deeper understanding. When you don't have a lot of context about who you're speaking to, it is a really specific, hard challenge. And sometimes you just have to create personas based on who you're talking to. So if you're going to be speaking to C-suite people, you just have to understand how to speak to a C-suite level person. They usually don't have a lot of time for intricate details. They want to get the information in front of them as quickly as possible. But that doesn't mean you throw away the storytelling aspect. You just position the story in a way based on the fact that they're busy. So you'll just position it in a quicker way to get to the solution. If you're speaking to people who are also brand new to the company or people who've been at the company for a long time, there's all types of personas that you can kind of put yourself into their shoes and try to imagine yourself, what kind of information would you want to hear based on your understanding? But always keep in mind, you can't walk in and know everything about everyone. Like, even if I knew every name of person who was going to be sitting in an audience for a speech, I could never personify the speech enough so they're all like, yes, that is exactly the story that I'm going through in my head, and I can totally align to this. You'll be fine as long as you have generic goalposts of who these people are, how happy they are, how unhappy they are is usually a good angle to lie into. But it's kind of a roundabout question, but it does require a lot of different types of research and guessing and learning and growing from there.
I I just had an insight as you were talking about this. It's impossible to know everything about the audience. And I feel like part of the research is really just the intent to research and the intent to understand as much as I can about who I'm talking to. And
Mhm.
I know that I can't know everything, but the fact that I have the intent to be focused on the audience, it's going to make me just organically more audience centric.
That's true.
Even
It's a
when,
very good start.
right, even when I don't know everything, and just the fact that I'm taking some kind of action, I am more audience centric by
Yeah.
default.
And it's something that marketers, if you think about marketers, they face this all the time. So they don't know every detail about their customer, and their customers' minds may change in an instant. So it's one of the common phrases that you'll hear within the marketing world is meeting customers where they are.
Mhm.
So it's really thinking through, if you do have that intent, as you were speaking about, on doing the research about them, it's also just understanding like what drives them, what wakes them up every day. You may have to make it up, but you will have that basis of that initial intent for research. The one thing that I would caution against is going too far into demographics. So
Mm.
this person's a boomer, this person's a millennial. I mean, anyone who's a millennial knows that there are many different types of millennials out there. You can't just put them all under the avocado toast and therefore it's done. So you have to think through the nuances of that. There's a great slide that you'll see if you Google this again, and it's a picture of King Charles and a picture of Ozzy Osbourne. They have demographically exactly the same stuff. Born in England, live in castles, rich, but they're completely different people, obviously.
Wait, sorry,
So
what is this image? I need to
it's
Google
an
it now.
image of Prince Charles or King
Prince
Charles
King Charles.
and Ozzy Osbourne, the heavy metal rocker.
Okay.
So they were both born in the same year, both born in the UK, both rich, both live in castles. But they couldn't be more different from each other because you have to think about, as you were speaking about having the intent to do the research, you also
Mhm.
have to think about the intent of the audience. And sometimes you have to guess, but that's how you continue to finesse and grow. The storytelling and understanding your audience isn't a one and done deal. It's a consistently moving piece of information. And that's why marketers love that, because they can continue to learn more and more about the people who they're targeting.
Oh my god, I have to bring up this image. It is everything.
I showed it to some
Sure.
students who were in their early 20s, and I had to explain who Ozzy Osbourne was. They didn't know that.
I'm gonna bring it up just for 1 second. There we go. They are not the same. They're really not.
And that example, that from the Medium example too, like she's speaking about two people who, you may have gone to school with somebody who was born on the same day as you, but you couldn't be more different. So,
Mhm.
those kinds of assumptions of just demographics aren't going to be enough. They're a good start, but once you get into their feelings, what motivates them, what wakes them up, that helps you move into that second state.
Where'd you go? There you go. Yes, that makes so much sense. Coming back to this question, we talked a lot about what audience-centric approach means. What is the opposite of that?
It's the product is the hero of the story. That's there. It has nothing to do with the people who are listening to this story. They may know
Mhm,
the details, but it has nothing to do with them as people, and it's
mhm.
not hitting them emotionally. I'm currently teaching a copywriting class, and these are 101 copywriting students, so they want to become advertising people. And the
Oh.
one constant through line that I'm having to drumbeat into them is driving emotion into their writing, helping people feel something within their content. A non-audience centric approach is very like data, numbers,
Mm.
features, not benefits. And again, the hero is the product, not the audience itself.
I'm gonna add that here. I love what you said. We gotta drive emotions, not just numbers. What's an example of copy that is driving emotion?
Um, I will maybe pivot that into talk about like the number thing, because I
Okay.
think describing what it shouldn't be is sometimes easier.
Oh, good
So if
point.
you've if you've been in a conference or a presentation and somebody has their slide up and it has percentages and they just read the percentages or they just read the slide, that is very much like these numbers could mean anything to anybody.
Mm,
Numbers are, even though they're like, yes, 76% is a great number, but
mm,
even if you quantify it into a certain area,
mm,
numbers don't mean anything. 76% might mean something to somebody, and to another person being like, but what does that really mean? Why do I care? So, really
mm.
thinking through, in order to drive an emotion, back to what your positioning was, is to think about why should they care? Think about the worst audience that you may sit in front of, or sometimes you've sat in a presentation and you may be like, "Ugh, this is boring. I don't know why I'm here."
Right.
That is the worst nightmare of anybody who's doing any kind of storytelling or presentation.
Mm,
The way to counter that is to make sure that you are thinking through the emotion and kind of creating a story around those numbers, or creating a story around those parts that you may think is understandable. The biggest thing to remember though is like, why should they care? And if you
mhm.
think why they should care, that's usually thinking through the benefits to them.
I just realized there's so much work we could put into our resumes to tell stories.
Yes.
We definitely put numbers in there for sure. This
Hmm.
product drove 20% increase in engagement numbers. And we
Yeah.
want to see it as PMs, we want to see the impact. But how
And
do we
the, the 20%, that's actually a very good point, because there was a lot of internal business presentations tend to do that. They tend to, again, focus on that number of 20 times plus.
that's
And you
the
always have to
impact.
ask yourself, is that good? Like it might be. Yeah, it might be great. But you have to think about the person who is going to question that. And the
Mm,
best way to position your great numbers and your great successes is
mm,
to wrap it into a story about why it's successful. Why 20 times is way better than hearing 15 times. What was it before? What is it now? What was
Mhm.
your intention? Was that exceeding expectations? That's
Mhm.
awesome. Explain how you exceeded that expectation. Is that below expectations? There's the tension point, and then you can speak to how you're going to do better to meet that expectation next time.
Mhm. I love that. Here's a call to action to go and revisit our resumes.
Writing for ourselves is the hardest, and
Yes.
we can speak a little bit to that, like techniques to improve
Yeah.
storytelling, because
I
storytelling's
I have a
challenging.
question before we talk about the actual techniques.
Yeah,
And
you
that
bet.
question here is, what role should the PM play in terms of telling better stories? And the reason why I ask that question is because PM kind of does a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And when we're in a large organization with matrix organizations, with dotted lines, with virtual teams, etc., a lot of what the PM ends up doing is communication, which is aligning everyone and not necessarily just working with the teams to build the thing, but a
Mhm.
lot of times the PM ends up writing documents, writing status reports, reporting up,
Yeah.
running weekly syncs, etc. And I feel like that is where we could tell better stories because a PM is not just about working with the teams to build a thing. It's also to bring people along, to bring clarity into the work stream. It's to get buy-in. Oh, getting buy-in is a big one.
Diane,
It's
that's the
about
big thing
asking
about
for more resources, etc.
Yeah.
How do you see the PM role? Because from your perspective, you're in marketing or you're in communication. How might maybe we could broaden the question a little bit. It's not just the PM who needs to communicate. Everyone needs to,
Yeah,
essentially.
and it's a good point. There's a book called Everyday Business Storytelling, and I know the authors of it, and when they were promoting it, they highlighted it as great leaders tell great stories. And you do not need to be in a leadership position in order to tell great stories, but you're definitely going to position yourself as a great leader the better you tell stories. The other thing that I used to work with PMs and try to kind of squeeze out the story out of these
Mm,
products, out of these details. And quite often I would get it wrong because I didn't have that clear through line of the story. I didn't understand it. And we'd have to go back and forth into understanding it. And the
mm,
reason for that is based on what I said before, which is the why. Why should they care? Why are we creating this? What was the purpose of this? What did they feel before and what did they want them to feel
mm,
next? So a lot of this, the tactical toolkits that you have to create a story build you into a better leader. You know, the greatest leaders around, if they're not great storytellers now, you know for sure that they're going through training to become better storytelling.
I
And they're
love
not just showing up on stage and winging it, they're practicing, and they're just this is a tool that you must continue to flex and
their
muscle.
training.
Exactly. You're not going to get your stories perfect the first time ever, but
Mhm.
the more that you practice and the more that you get comfortable in
Yeah.
that situation, the better you will be in the end.
We have a message from Duncan. Be the master of your customers.
Know it
Story.
inside out.
Know it inside out. Share it widely and often. I love that. Thank you, Duncan, for chiming in.
That's a
And
great way. And
what was
actually,
that?
that made me think through something too. Is like sometimes, based on what Duncan said, your customers do tell the best stories, and
Mm,
infusing their beliefs, quotes, testimonials enhance your story because it actually shows that you're on the right path.
I love that. What was that book again? Was it the Everyday Business
Everyday
Storytelling?
business storytelling.
Got it. I'm gonna put the link um, in the chat. Also, let me bring it up for people to see. Also,
Mhm.
it has the yellow cover, right?
Correct.
Hold on one second. There we go. This one.
Correct. So they do really speak about visual narratives, so how to work in PowerPoint, but tell a story with a PowerPoint document. But the
Mhm.
basis of great storytelling is definitely based on a lot of what Janine says in this book. Another company to understand how to tell stories is Duarte, so Duarte, and they're based in your area, Nancy. And they have a bunch of different books on effective business storytelling, including one that's specific to telling stories around data.
Hold on one second. Is that a book? You're
Yeah, just put in Duarte. Nancy Duarte is the
Oh.
storytelling with data. It's a bestseller. And
The
that is
first
how you
one?
tell stories with numbers.
This one.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I also love what you said just now. You said every leader, um,
Great leaders tell great stories.
yes. I was like, well, how did you say it? I'm gonna put that. I'm gonna put it up. Great leaders tell great stories. And he also said every leader is getting trained or working on it.
Yes. No one just wings it, even if they
Yeah.
look like they do.
Oh my gosh. Great leaders tell great stories. Does it mean that if you want to be seen as a leader, you have to be a storyteller?
I believe so.
I believe so too. I
Yeah.
agree with you.
I think like Gary Vaynerchuk said that it's like it's the most underrated skill in business.
I
And
agree.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. That's the connection you get to form with
Hmm.
people
Yeah,
is through stories. And
exactly.
that's how humans are wired.
100%.
I love that. And coming back to what you were saying earlier, techniques to
Yeah.
use to
So there's
improve.
a few, because I
Mm,
know writing can sometimes be intimidating, and even thinking up a story is something really scary. So there's a few that I can think through. So, first of all, quickly, I used to not be somebody who thought I could write well. When I was in university, I did all my essays the night before they were due,
oh
and then
wow.
I'd get really bad grades on them, and then be like, oh, I'm not a good writer. Not the fact that I just wrote everything the night before they were due. So I lived according to this belief that I couldn't write well. And now I own a storytelling business. So I believe anyone can write good stories. It just takes practice and just takes pivoting your thinking.
Yeah.
So I mentioned the hero's journey before. Make sure you look that up and see the whole circle and the pivot points to a bold, good story. And you'll start to
Yeah.
see that in the entertainment that you're watching. And you may start to see it also in some of the stories you're being told in a professional setting. A second one, just to get comfortable with writing, is
Mm,
making sure you write every day. And I'm not saying write a journal. Like if you want to write a journal, that's great. But it's just making sure that you are writing something every day. It could be two
mhm.
sentences about what you experienced today or what you observed yesterday. Just keeping up that practice of writing is something that really hones in the practice and you still start to feel a bit more comfortable.
I have a question on that.
Hmm.
Is storytelling writing? As in, do we have to write in order to get better at storytelling?
I believe so because writing helps clarify your thinking.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I have a quote from Adam Grant. He was like, writing isn't what you do after the idea, it's what you do to develop an idea. So
Oh,
you're just because you're not a writer, that shouldn't stop you from writing because writing's a tool for thinking.
I love that. I love that so much because and it's all making so much sense. I am a journaler. I journal
Mhm.
all the time,
Perfect.
especially when I don't feel good, and
Yeah.
especially when I want to make a wish. Then I take out my journal, I start writing, and it
Mhm.
helps me clear my head. It helps me declutter everything
Mhm.
that's happening, and then I can
Yeah.
become really clear on why I don't feel good and what is it that I really want. And it's all making so much sense that writing clarifies things.
Yeah. And
Which
one thing that is a good another tactics, I know sometimes even just staring at a screen, blank screen can be scary,
yeah.
is something called the Pomodoro method, which some of you may already be familiar with. But it's just setting a timer for 20 minutes, turning
Mm,
off all notifications, and
mhm.
just writing, just typing, writing. I don't even look at the screen while I'm typing, and it's just getting all your thoughts down for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
And then after those 20 minutes, walk away and then come back to it and fix everything because you'll have tons of spelling mistakes and everything like that. But it's your document, but the best part is you've now written your first draft because all your ideas are down. And now all you have to do is refine it and fix it and shift it into a story. And you can edit things out and then put things back in. And it's a wonderful tool if you're just somebody who gets really frightened and overworked on thinking about that perfect first line.
I love that. I love that. Oh, thank you so much, Leanne, for coming on to my live stream and sharing all the insights. I have learned so much, and I feel like I need to write more. That's my takeaway. I do want to become better at storytelling. That's a fact. And that I feel like will be my lifelong goal is to
Fantastic.
be a better storyteller or just keep on improving. Tell us more about um, B2B marketing storyteller, your company, and
Mhm.
what you do.
Yeah. So I currently help businesses with their narratives. So those stories they need to tell in order to make sure everyone's aligned to a North Star, or if they have a new product that they're trying to get, or if they're trying to get funding, for example, I help with pitch decks. So it's really infusing that storytelling that I just spoke about into a more business-like setting. So some of the things that I offer workshops, storytelling workshops for
Love that.
offsites, 1 hour, kind of going more hands-on based on
Mm,
what we spoke about today. I also can edit. I can be that second set of eyes on the content. If you have a big presentation that or your
mhm.
office needs something that's huge, I can be that person who comes in and refines it or creates the through line that's missing throughout the story.
Love
And I
that.
also write speeches and all sorts of content design.
Do you work with individuals as well or just companies?
Just companies, it's
Okay.
B2B.
B2B, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so a lot of times it is the narrative, the business narrative. What does our business stand for, and why would
Mhm.
anyone care? Basically, like what I said before. So
Yeah.
I help them refine why people should care and help them pivot into the story so that they have great business results.
Do you also help with the delivery of the presentation and the delivery of the speech?
Yeah, I can help with the training, so I can be that person who's listening and giving you the
I love that.
heartfelt advice and feedback in order to improve your presentation.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Leanne, for coming on. And
Thank you.
I I've taken a lot away from this conversation. There's a lot of tactical things. I'm gonna check out that book. Thank you so much, and I hope that you could come back again next time and
Yes.
do a part 2 of this.
Exciting. Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care.